Hi, everyone. Welcome to Softball Canada's first speaker series webinar presented by Rawlings Canada. The topic for today's webinar is the Podium Pathway with our guest speaker, Mark Smith, Softball Canada's high performance director and our Canadian women's national team head coach. Although the softball season is currently on hold due to the coronavirus situation, we're very happy to have the opportunity to engage with you during these unprecedented times, and we hope you will enjoy listening to our great speakers that we have. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue au premier webinaire de Softball Canada présenté par Rawlings Canada. Le sujet du webinaire d'aujourd'hui est le parcours au podium avec notre invité spécial Mark Smith, directeur de haute performance de Softball Canada et l'entraîneur-chef de notre équipe nationale féminine. Quoique la saison de softball est en pause en raison de la situation COVID-19, on est heureux d'avoir la chance de nous engager avec vous lors de ces temps et on espère que vous aimerez écouter nos excellents invités. Ce webinaire sera principalement en anglais, mais vous pouvez poser vos questions en français et on communiquera à Mark afin qu'il puisse les répondre. Vous pouvez composer vos questions à tout moment dans la boîte des questions sur votre écran. During the webinar, feel free to type your questions as you think of them in the questions box. Mark will answer as many of them as possible during the Q&A portion of this webinar. Before we get started, we want to thank you all for joining us and for following the social distancing measures as directed by the Government of Canada and your local health authorities. Softball Canada is monitoring the situation closely and is posting regular updates on its website. Please continue to follow the government's COVID-19 prevention measures to help flatten the curve, and we will be back on the field as soon as it is safe to do so. Avant de commencer, on veut vous remercier d'être avec nous et de suivre les mesures de distanciation sociale telles qu'identifiées par le gouvernement du Canada et vos autorités locales de soins de la santé. Softball Canada surveille la situation de près et publie des mises à jour régulières sur notre site web. Veuillez continuer à suivre les mesures de prévention du gouvernement du Canada pour aider à rétrécir la courbe et on sera de retour sur le terrain dès que ce sera possible d'y retourner en sécurité. With that, I would like to introduce you to Angela Ballantyne, Softball Canada's Manager of Long-Term Player Development Programs, who will be your host for today's webinar with guest speaker Mark Smith on the Podium Pathway. Take it away, Angela.
Great, thanks so much, Jill. We're just going to get our webcams up so everybody can put a face to a name. So I'm also going to just get Mark set up here. Let's get going. There's always got to be a few glitches before we get started, but we'll be good to go soon. Oh, there's Mark. Now we just need you to be unmuted. Chat, there we go.
All right.
Now we can hear you. Perfect. So good afternoon, everybody in the East, and good morning still to those in the West. We're excited to be here today. So like Jill said, my name is Angela, and I am the manager of long-term player development programs. And during my time with Softball Canada, I've been lucky enough to work with Mark on a few different projects. First was probably the Can Pitch program and its development, and then most recently has been the athlete development matrix and the implementation of our gold medal profile into that. So I think of myself as quite lucky to have been able to pick your brain, Mark, over the years. So hopefully we have a good little chat here today, and everybody gets a little something from it. So I think starting off, you know, for maybe those of the people, the listeners on the call, not the call, the webinar, sorry, who don't know you as well, maybe if you could start by giving everybody a background on yourself growing up, your playing career, and then how you transitioned into coaching the men's side and most recently the female side.
Okay, Angela, thanks. Well, I started playing softball in Nova Scotia many years ago. Started at sort of the bantam midget age of the game and sort of progressed through to the junior age, which during my time started at 17 through 21. and spent a couple of years at the junior level playing first for Nova Scotia and then eventually for Ontario before moving to British Columbia in 1979 and playing for the Victoria Budgets, who were the reigning senior men's national champions, as well as at the time, the ISF world champions. So started in Victoria in 79 with the Victoria team, had an opportunity to go to my first Pan Am Games as part of that team in 79. A few years later, moved to Southern California and played for a team in Camarillo that eventually won back-to-back ISC World Tournament Championships, which in essence was a North American championship, before returning to Canada to play on the 83 Pan Am team and play for Saskatchewan, where we finished, I think, silver at the Nationals that year. And a few years later, returned home here to Nova Scotia to start a career and continued with softball and began to develop a younger senior program in the province that through the early 90s towards the late 90s, eventually hosted the national championship in 98 and was fortunate enough to win on home soil, and that was the end of the playing. But I became involved with the national team, first with Victoria, who were the national team, because at that time, the team that won the world championship or won the national championship the year before a major international event represented Canada with a select number of pickups. In 83, when the first official men's national team was selected, I was fortunate enough to be a part of that program, and I concluded my time with the national team in 1994 before being asked by Terry Bader, who was then the head coach, to come out and assist with some camps for the national team, and was able to do that and eventually became a member of that staff and have been involved in coaching internationally since 1996.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of my history in a nutshell.
That's it in a nutshell. It's a pretty illustrious career right there. What would you say is probably your most rewarding memory thus far in terms of coaching?
Well, I think winning the national title in 98, because I was a player coach and that was the last year I played, that was extremely rewarding for a number of reasons. To do it at home, to do it with primarily young Nova Scotian kids that had never been part of a successful team. A great way to finish a career. My family, my parents, my daughter, to be present for that was pretty neat. I think our 2003 Pan Am team that won in Dominican Republic was extremely rewarding, my first as a head coach, but also because of the challenges we faced with conflicting ISC tournaments and players who would have been expected to play on the national team unable to be available. We ended up with a group of pretty hard-nosed individuals that stepped up and played extremely well and were the reason that we won that gold medal. And I was very proud to be a part of that group, as well as the group we took to New Zealand a year later, or in Saskatchewan in 2009 when we finished third. Just a great group of men that worked very hard and played very hard and represented their country the right way. And I think anytime you have an opportunity to wear the maple leaf, it's something you want to be extremely proud of, because it doesn't happen to very many people.
Absolutely. So having coached both the men and the women, what do you think is the biggest difference, and how have you overcome that as a coach?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that men grow up, as boys, we grew up emulating our favorite Major League Baseball player and then perhaps our favorite male softball player. And we spent a lot of time in what I would call free play, meaning that, you were out at 13, 14, 15 playing pickup games and playing with older kids and learning new techniques and having the opportunities to succeed and fail in a very nurturing and supportive environment from the perspective of being able to do it day after day after day without really being judged, other than maybe being picked last if you didn't play well for too long. Women don't have that opportunity. Women come from a very structured sport environment. There's not a lot of free play. There is not a lot of encouragement to go out and try things and succeed or fail based on trying things. So, they have sort of been prescribed how to play the game from the youngest of ages, maybe 12 years of age on. They're constantly being told what to do, directed how to do things. One of the things that I found very interesting when I became involved on the women's side was how few catchers understood the nuances of calling a game. And, I came to learn through talking to these young women that from the time they were 14 or 15 years of age, their coaches at the club level have taken the responsibility from them. So rather than teaching them how to call a game and working with them and allowing them to call for a few innings and the coach call for a few innings and sort of nurturing and mentoring them along, in many instances, it was completely taken from them. And when they graduated, if they were fortunate enough to go on and play collegiately, the coaches at the collegiate level controlled all aspects of the game. So, here would be a 20, 21, 22-year-old woman that would show up at a national team camp to try out for an extremely important position and was very uncomfortable with the prospects of calling a game and setting up hitters and understanding what it took to be successful, because for the last 7 or 8 years of their lives, they hadn't been mentored and taught how to do it. So that was one of the first things that jumped out at me. The women work very hard. They very much want to know and understand why you're asking them to do particular things. I think when I first got involved, I was really surprised at how often they asked why. Not that it was a bad thing, but just that constant need to understand why you're asking me to do this and how this benefits my performance and how it makes me better. Whereas on the male side of the game, and you become very comfortable with it as a male and having grown up in that environment, you just go out and play. And your coach will come to you usually if there's something you're struggling with. But aside from that, you're generally left alone to sort it out for yourself and sort it out among your peers. And the coaching staff really has very little to do with teaching skill, whereas on the women's side, we are constantly teaching and reinforcing aspects of the game, which quite frankly I like, because I like the teaching element of it, and it allows you to get to know your athletes better. So it's neither right nor wrong, it's just the difference in the environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that coaches are experiencing right now that you have some definite experience with is overcoming geographical distances. Do you have any tips that you can provide coaches who might be experiencing this for the first time, where they're trying to motivate their athletes and they're not able to see them and they're not able to get out and practice? How have you managed to do that so well for so long?
Well, one of the advantages I have certainly is that I'm dealing with women, and many of them do have the resources to be able to do things on their own. But something that we've continued to do in the last 4 weeks as this COVID-19 has taken over our world, we've used the Zoom platform on a weekly basis to stay connected and to talk about what people are doing. Last night we had a call where we had our nutritionist and we had our mental performance coach and we had our strength and conditioning coach all on to present segments of the programs that our athletes are on and what the continuation of those programs will be. And there's a regular interaction around us being able to stay connected to them. A week ago, Monday night, I did a webinar with a minor association in Southern New Brunswick, where same type of format, a Zoom format with kids and parents and coaches. And we just talked about what you can do to train in an environment like this, and what are some of the things the athletes can do within the confines of their own home to stay busy and stay connected. So it's challenging for sure. I think all of us are finding it really difficult to be so tied to home and unable to get out and do the things we normally would do. But the fitness side of it, I know for myself, it's been getting up every morning and going to the basement and getting in an hour and 15 minutes of fitness, whether it's cardio or weightlifting, but finding things to do that just make me feel as normal as I can under the circumstances. And I think with ball players, we've talked to the players about, if you've got a bow net, get out in your backyard with a bucket of balls and you can take your swings. If you've got a garage door or you've got a concrete wall in a basement, you can feel ground balls. Visually, you can sit down in your mind and think about, from an imagery standpoint, facing particular pictures, looking at your video of certain games, going back and rehearsing it in your own mind, and how would you prepare for the next time for that hitter. These are more advanced things in some respects, but the point being is that if you're creative enough and you're open to it, there are ways that you can engage your athletes and continue to allow them to think about the sport, despite the fact that we can't get out and play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So considering this is a conversation about Podium Pathway, I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about Own the Podium and how working with them more recently has impacted and influenced the way in which you're coaching, and how the gold medal profile and winning style of play has been incorporated into your coaching style. Can you tell us a bit about how that relationship started and how that's kind of come to be?
Well, after the softball was announced in, I think it was August of 2016, that it would be on the Olympic platform program for 2020. Because of our world standing as a number 3 in the world sport, we became what would be called a targeted sport by on the podium. And what that means is that we aren't a core sport because we aren't in the Olympic Games year after year, but we were a sport that they felt had the potential to win a medal at the Olympics. And so as a result of that, we were provided with really some one-on-one mentoring around what true high performance looks like, how to build a process by which we could have checks and balances that were actually based on qualitative and quantitative measures, so that it was no longer about my best guess or a subjective assessment of things. It was, how can you prove that you are able to do the things that you can do? And this was a very new process for me, for sure, because we, as somebody that's been involved in the game a long time, and also in my career outside of softball as a senior manager working in sport, you really come to appreciate that a lot of the checks and balances that we use to measure success really don't stand up to the sniff test when it really comes down to measuring what you are in fact successful at. And so the process that I went through over about a 4-month period was this immersion into how you actually assess success and how you rank and rate your ability to perform. And what really brought it home was the fact that we had to gather data from the countries that ranked ahead of us in the world. So at the time, which it still is Japan and the United States, and then Australia and Puerto Rico and say Mexico. So top 5 or 6 in the world. What we had to do was gather all of the data from all of the games we had played those teams within the last 3 or 4 years, and then look at each of the categories: runs scored, runs against, number of errors, strikeouts, how often did we put the ball in play, how many hits did we average per game, how many strikeouts did we average per game, how many times did our pitchers walk leadoff hitters. I mean, it really was a lot of information to get your head around. But what it eventually did was it gave us a very clear snapshot of where we performed really well internationally and where we had work to do. So it was no longer my best guess at what we were good at, but here were the facts. And we came to find that there were some things that we thought we were better at than the facts actually proved to be. And we also found that there were things we hadn't given ourselves a lot of credit for that we were better at than we thought. But it was a great starting point, and it really drove home what true high performance is. It's a term that's thrown around, and in my experience in working at the provincial level, even regional level, we talk about teams being high performance, and the truth is they're not. They're regional all-star teams, they're pathway to high performance teams, they're learning what it takes to become true high performance. But high performance sport is international level sport where you are competing against the best in the world on a day-to-day basis. So it really helped me to understand what true high performance looked like. It also exposed me to other coaches that were running world-class programs, and to be able to pick their brains and to go and watch their teams train and to talk to athletes they coached and just understand the underpinnings of how they developed their programs and how they built the success they've had. Those were the things that really drove me in terms of looking at how we would shape the next 3 or 4 years on our way to the Olympic Games. The gold medal
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, do you think you've seen an actual shift in terms of abilities since you've made those integrations?
I think the level of intention that we now train with as a team, that we coach with as a staff, I think the type of difficult conversations we have with one another as a staff in terms of holding ourselves accountable. So it's not just about, are the athletes meeting the standards that have been set? Are we meeting the standards that have been set as a staff? Are we actually doing the things we need to do to make them better? So it's opened a lot of eyes, and it's certainly made for some sleepless nights, but it's forced us to be better because we're asking them to be better, and therefore we have a responsibility to do the same.
Right. And sorry, I interrupted. You're going to go on to the gold medal profile. Do you want to say a bit about that too?
Well, as part of this process and gathering this information, one of the things I was asked, which I found really interesting at the time, was, if a 12-year-old walked in the room that played softball, or 2 12-year-olds walked in the room that played softball, how would I know which of those kids had the greatest potential to be able to play on the national team 7-10 years later? And the truth is, you don't know for a lot of factors, but if we looked at sort of physiological benchmarks, what would they be? So we started at the U12 level, and we talked to coaches across the country that were immersed in coaching in those age groups and had history and really had an understanding of the game at that level. And we talked with exercise physiologists and we looked at benchmarks from other sports, gymnastics and soccer and rugby. And we tried to get a sense of our profile of what is the average 12-year-old capable of? And then in our sport, what does that look like? So we had some people do some testing around throwing the ball, the velocities they could throw the ball, how fast they could run, what the bat speed was, very basic things, just things that started to give us a bit of a snapshot of what kids at a particular age group look like. And we decided that we wanted to keep it really simple. So we had a 1 to 4 ranking. 4 was excellence, 1 was below average. And then each of those categories, from the technical tactical skills that we would teach to the mental performance skills that would be introduced to the physiological strength and conditioning things that an athlete would learn, based on age and stage of development, what were those measuring sticks that would give us the truest indication of an athlete progressing through the system towards high performance? And not only that, but if a coach from anywhere in the country had an athlete that he or she felt truly was exhibiting above average skills for their age, how would they know if this kid was just, is this the norm for the age group in the country, or is she really ahead of the curve? So by being able to really sit down and kind of look at what exceptions looked like at each age and stage of development, I think it allowed you and your group to better inform the matrix in terms of how do we help coaches identify what needs to be taught and when they have somebody on their hands that has the ability to really be an exceptional talent, and how do we help that coach identify where that athlete needs to go to get the coaching they may need to make to the next step. So I think it's become an invaluable resource, and I think different than some sports who developed it and sort of put it on the shelf, we've continued to go back and revisit it, specifically to our own category of international, in terms of you set standards in 2017 based on what you know. On March the 2nd, we had our fitness testing done in Halifax, and we had 89 personal bests.
Yeah.
And some of the scores were just out of this world from a fitness standpoint. So we'll now go back and look at the physiological markers that we identified for international softball on our national team, and where do we need to bump them up, because we now know that actually an athlete at this level, when they are training as they should be, can actually perform to this standard. So it's a bit of a living document, but it constantly gives us a bit of a snapshot of where kids are in that continuum, and whether we need to work harder to bring them to a point of meeting a standard, or if they're exceeding a standard, and how we can push them on to the next level.
Right. So if anyone is looking for those resources, you can access the Athlete Development Matrix and Gold Medal Profile on Softball Canada's website. They are free to download, and like Mark said, they are phenomenal resources that I think every coach can certainly benefit from taking a look at. So awesome. So I guess what would be your advice right now for younger coaches or coaches looking to advance their careers specifically in Canada? How can they better themselves, and what can they do to put themselves in a good position to have more experience or be able to showcase themselves as great coaches?
Well, I'm a big believer in education, coach education, but professional development, leadership development. So, long before I recognized that I was eventually going to be in the position that I've been fortunate enough to be in, I was constantly looking for ways to better myself and learn. Now, part of that was my career outside of softball and leadership roles, but understanding how to be a better and more effective leader, understanding how to communicate better and understand better and problem solve better. And so those were things that were always really important to me. And I remember when I started with the national team, many years ago, and I would ask questions around PD and what types of opportunities were there. And quite honestly, there weren't very many. You had to get into reading on your own and researching on your own to find out the things that you didn't know or the gaps that you felt existed. I also have been somebody throughout my career that was never shy or afraid to ask something of somebody that I thought they were really good at. So if I saw a pitcher when I was an up and coming pitcher, an older pitcher that was very good at a particular aspect of what they did, I was the guy that would go over and ask them if they'd show me how they did it. I mean, all they could tell me was no. And I can't tell you where it came from. It was just my makeup, and it's always been that way. So, for example, when On the Podium identified us and basically said to us in the fall of 2016, how can we help you become better? What are some of the things you have? The first thing I thought of was, well, who are some of the coaches in this country that are doing exceptional things and run exceptional programs? And I'd like to go spend some time with them in that environment to observe what they do. So I was lucky enough to spend 7-8 days with John Herdman in women's soccer. And I stayed at the hotel. I was in every team meeting. I was at every practice. I was in player coach meetings. There wasn't a thing they did that he didn't allow me to be a part of. And so I came away with a very clear understanding of what true high performance looks like. Mel Davidson with women's hockey became someone I got to know fairly well and has been a mentor in terms of sharing with me her pathway along the her continuum of winning gold medals with women's hockey and moving from a coach to a general manager. So spent, a lot of time on the phone with her, and most recently at one of the women's camps, sitting with her and watching her observe talent and having those conversations about what they look for and what we look for. So I have tried at every stage to take advantage. On the Podium eventually, and the CAC and the COC have created a program called Canada Coach, which is, I think, one of the greatest and most important programs that have ever been created, where they actually target national team coaches from across the country, and they put them in a 16, 18-month immersion program where you actually come together with 8 or 10 coaches around different topics of professional development, and you learn about coaching, and you learn about leadership, and you learn about decision making, and you learn about public speaking, and you learn about problem solving. And you do all of this within a cohort of coaches where you create your safe space and you can share your challenges and your fears and your frustrations. And it's been an incredible experience. In fact, our cohort finished in October, and last week we still had a phone call. We've started an every 2-week phone call with the group of coaches I met through that program, just to stay connected and talk about how we're coping with COVID-19 and coaching our teams. So it's been an invaluable support and resource. So I guess that's a long-winded answer to say to coaches, be open to learning, recognize that as much as you think you know, you still don't know it all, that there are people out there willing to help if you ask. And I think the most important thing, regardless of the age and stage we coach, it's about the kids. It's about the athletes. It's not about us. It's not personal accomplishment. It's not because I want to be in charge of something where I can tell people what to do. It's about how do I help these young boys and young girls realize their dreams, become better softball players, and as a result of that, better people.
Right. And it seems as though you've had a number of really influential mentors along the way. How important is that? I mean, you've touched a little bit on that, but how important is making those connections? Like, is that something you would highly recommend, like everyone listening, is find that person for themselves that they can,
Absolutely.
have those conversations with and pick their brains. It seems as though you've had a number of them. Is there one that stands out in your career?
I think at different stages of your development, different people come into your life and they are able to help you through different things. My dad was a mentor to me. I've worked for people who were absolutely mentors to me, whether at the time they realized it or not. I've coached with people that even though I may have been in the head coach role, I've learned things from in terms of how they approach doing things. More recently with John and with Mel, it was a chance to watch 2 people who have coached as a profession for many years and how they've crafted their skill and how they've developed the skills they have to be as successful as their programs have been. But I think it's invaluable to have mentors, and I think it's important to find people that they're kind of going to be your truth mirror, that they're going to tell you what you need to hear, whether you like it or not. And I think that's one of the harder parts of mentoring is people want to hear the good things, but we don't often want to hear the bad things. And if you're going to ask somebody to support you, you have to be willing to hear them tell you the things you have to be better at. And so, right. But I think you should have mentors. I think people should actively seek them out, because there's no question it's an invaluable resource in terms of your learning.
And do you think that you're that person for your assistant coaches, and how have you been able to help them with their professional development?
Well, I think you'd have to ask them that. I certainly try to lead by example. I'm sure there's days when they weren't all that happy with me. But, you try to lead by example. And what I've tried to do is everything I've gone off and learned professionally, professional development, whether it was with Canada Coach or whether it was with spending times with other mentors or other coaches, I've always tried to expose them to as well. So here's the information. Here's the presentation that I've done up. Here's an opportunity for you to read and learn. Wade Gilbert, Dr. Wade Gilbert, who's our mental performance coach, is one of the most well-known people in the world on coaching effectiveness. And before Wade became involved to do our mental performance, we met almost 10 years ago now. We struck up a friendship. But he's absolutely been a mentor in terms of his knowledge of working with world-class coaches and what the models look like for world-class coaching. I had him come in and do presentations and workshops with our staff when we were in California in 2018, 2 or 3 days, brought in some of the junior staff to be a part of it because, you know, there's so many takeaways. There's such value in being around and learning from somebody who's been and seen the very best in the world. So, you know, I've tried to pay it forward in terms of giving people those opportunities, but it ultimately, Angela, you have to be wired that way. There are a lot of people that I've come to learn that they like to coach and they like what comes with it in terms of the recognition, but they aren't necessarily willing to work hard and put in the time. And the reality is, if you're not willing to work hard and put in the time, eventually you're going to run out of road in terms of being the best you can be and helping your athletes be the best they can be.
Right. No, absolutely. So I follow a lot of the ladies on social media, and I see you can like almost feel their excitement or what their excitement was leading up into the games. And you know, even since the announcement of the postponement, that really hasn't changed. And they are an incredible group of ladies that seems to be, you know, really excited and have a lot of positive momentum. So how have you been able to continue that right now?
Well, I give them a lot of credit for that. We've got a lot of leadership in this team, not just the people who are sort of the designated leaders, but a core leadership group of women who are just amazing women. And they have been very good about shaping our culture. And I could have called them the culture keepers. They're the ones that ensure that in those moments when things get a little hairy or when people get a little frustrated, they're very good at being able to kind of guide them back to the flock and make sure that at the end of the day, we're still living up to our standards. So I don't take a lot of responsibility for that. Certainly earlier on, part of my goal was to sort of help shape the way we did things and expose them to people and opportunities that help them think differently and understand the bigger picture to life, that softball was just one piece of it. But I think we've arrived at a place where we've got a very mature group of people. I think we're very clear on our goals and very clear on our expectations. I've been lucky enough to surround them with some incredible people. Our strength and conditioning coach, Scott Wildress, is world class in terms of the program he's developed. And if we're not the fittest team in the world, I don't know who is. Wade Gilbert is second to none. And before him, Lauren Cashman, an incredible job. Dave Petkow was our hitting coach for a number of years and did a great job in setting the stage. Rob Ginter and then Russell Cooper with the pitching. We've just been really, really blessed. Melissa Basilio with infield and Chris Jones. We've been blessed with some good people who are there for the right reasons. They're not here because of any recognition that comes with it. They're here with one focus, which is how do we win a gold medal at the Olympic Games, and how do we help these women prepare to the best of their ability to be in a best position to do that. And so I think by surrounding them with the right people, by making the tough decisions, they know that at the end of the day, that as a staff, we will always put the team first. We will always make decisions that are in the best interest of the team. And I think over time, you earn that credibility and respect with them, and it plays itself out in terms of the culture that you eventually develop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's very evident from a viewer's point of view, for sure. So you touched a little bit on it before. This past winter, when you did have the team together in Halifax, they did post a number of personal bests in terms of their fitness training. Can you tell us about what that experience was like as a whole, having your team together for that period of time? It seems like it was pretty special.
It was. I mean, and especially for me, I'm from Nova Scotia. So to be home, to be able to have this happen in my own backyard, to allow the people from Nova Scotia to see just how truly special this group of women are, excuse me, how hard they work, was extremely rewarding for me. And the environment that we had in terms of the supports. The Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic provided access to their facility and everything else that we could ask for. Members of the community stepped up and did things to ensure that the athletes were as comfortable as they could be. Michelle O'Coin, who's our team leader, canvassed everybody she knew to provide crock pots and toasters and things that the athletes could use in their living quarters. CFB Shearwater, which is the Forces base in Halifax, were kind enough to allow us to stay on the base and and provided a great opportunity for us to be together as a group. Soccer Nova Scotia provided us with an indoor facility that allowed us to do everything we needed to do to prepare. So we were really fortunate, and it worked well, and it was cost effective. And when we left Halifax on the 13th of March, just before the world turned upside down, we were as ready as you could possibly be for phase 2 of our preparation, which was to go to Fresno State, where Wade Gilbert is a prof and would have been involved with the team on a daily basis during that 6-week period, and then eventually on to Japan to do some test series. So we were as ready as you could possibly be for the next phase of things, and it was extremely disappointing and frustrating that it kind of came to a crashing halt. But the good news in it is that the athletes know what they were able to achieve, and they know that when they put the time in, this is the result. And the way I presented it and the way I honestly see it is that we've got another whole year to get even better. And there's good news in that.
Yeah, there's a silver lining, in all of this craziness right now. So, well, that's great. I guess I only have a couple more questions, and then we'll go to the question box. So if anyone has any questions, just put them in that little box, and we'll get Mark to answer some of them. I guess one of my biggest questions is if you could change one thing in the game today, what would that be?
Wow.
And if it's nothing, that's fine too.
You know, I really don't have a real pet peeve. Probably if I had one, it would be technology. And I feel that way about even professional sport in general. I think the pendulum has shifted too far now to technology being to driving success. I look at NHL hockey in the sticks. You know, I don't think you get a true representation of a person's skill when you've got a stick that adds 10 miles an hour to a shot. I don't think you have a true representative of a hitter when you have a bat that allows people to hit 30 feet further than they normally could based on their own physical size and strength. So I'm not a fan of those things. Maybe I'm a little bit, you know, I'm showing my age, but I just feel as though things can sometimes go too far the other way, and it then becomes less about skill and more about size or strength than it does about actual skill. And so that would be the only thing. I think the bats in softball in general, men's or women's, I think they've gotten a little out of hand. And I don't think it's, in my mind, it's not great for the sport. I understand that we have hitters that are good hitters and we benefit from it too. But if we're looking at it from a global perspective, I don't know that those things are necessarily great for the sport.
All right. What do you think motivates you to keep coaching, especially considering, I mean, obstacles are being put in your way almost daily right now. What keeps you going?
Well, you know, I'm at the end of it. You know, this was the end of it for me. And quite honestly, I was looking forward to July 29th and turning the page, and not for any other reason other than this game has been part of my life for 45 years. And I've got a wife and a family, and I've got other things I want to do. And I think I'm at an age and stage in my life where I'm ready to do those other things. So, you know, I was disappointed certainly that first when it was canceled and then when it got pushed to another year, because it does mean that's another year of my life that I have to put off other things to do this. But, you know, I love to coach, and I love to teach, and I love the people I'm around, and I thoroughly love the women that we work with. And those are the things that I take from it. It's, you know, this game has been so good to me, and I've enjoyed so much personal success that, you know, an Olympic medal or an Olympic gold medal would be wonderful, but it's not going to define my career in any way, shape, or form. But when I look at how hard these women have worked and how far they've come and how much they believe in themselves and how truly capable they are of being an Olympic champion in 14, 15 months, that's part of what drives me, to help them realize their goals and to do something that no other Canadian team in the history of summer games have ever done.
Yeah, that's pretty special. It's going to be great when it happens.
It is so.
Okay, so I guess I'll leave my last question as this, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll get to some of the questions that have come in through the question box. So my last question for you is what do you hope to leave as your legacy with softball?
I've never thought about that. You know, I've been involved with the game because I love it, because it's given me everything in the world that I've accomplished to this very second. And and sport has done that and given that to me. So I'm a true believer that sport is the way, the truth, and the light in terms of giving young kids opportunities to be successful in anything they want to do. You know, I just would like to be remembered, I guess, as just somebody that loved the game, that gave of themselves, that worked hard, that put in an honest day's work, that believed in being the best coach I could be to help the athletes I coach be the best players they could be.
I think you've already achieved that. So this was a great conversation. So we're just going to take a little break here. We have a little commercial, and then I'm going to take a look at some of the questions in the question box, and we'll come back with a few more questions for you.
Wonderful.
Okay. Okay, so we do have a few questions here, some which you've already touched on a little bit, but we're still going to ask you anyways. What do you think, this is coming from David, what do you think you would say is the most important quality to have as a high-level coach? Really putting you on the spot now.
I think a hunger to learn. You have to be willing to turn over every stone to learn the things you need to learn to constantly stay ahead of your athletes and be able to bring them the newest, the best, the most effective methods to be able to train and be prepared. So I think you constantly have to have a thirst for learning and staying ahead of the curve when it comes to understanding what's available.
Great. So this is an interesting question coming from Genevieve. She's wondering if the players on the team will be the same ones moving forward into 2021. Now, I know the team wasn't fully named yet, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about that process.
There were 20 women that were identified to come to Halifax that did. After there was the decisions made by the IOC that the games would be postponed a year, we met with each player to ask if they were interested in continuing, because we have some older women who have other things in their lives and had put a fair bit on hold to be able to compete and try out for the team this year. And we didn't want to assume that they automatically would be able to put things on hold for another 15, 16 months. So we actually visited with each player, and of the 20, all 20 have indicated that their intentions at this point in time are to continue with the process.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Okay, so this is coming from Kevin. In the Olympic qualifier, we lost to Mexico, and this is the team, or a team that we will have to beat in Tokyo. So we're obviously striving to beat Japan and the US, but what have we done since August 2019 to ensure Mexico will not beat us at the Olympics and potentially steal a medal from us?
Well, Mexico are a very good team, and they're only going to get better because the majority of their players, I think with the exception of one, are all US born. So they're actually American citizens or dual citizens. We played Mexico a number of times last year, both through the MPF as well as at the Pan Am Games. And, you know, we defeated Mexico. And for sure, in a game that we wanted to win at the qualifier, we came up a little short. And I'm as disappointed as the rest of Canada was. But as a coach, you still have to be able to step back and take away what actually happened. You know, we out hit Mexico 6 or 7-3. We had more runners on base. We had fewer strikeouts. The only thing we didn't do in that game was score one more run than they did. And I understand that that's how it's determined. But if I look at everything but the fact that we left too many runners on base and didn't score, we outplayed them. So I'm very confident that a year from now, we will be better prepared to score the runs we didn't score. But if you look at every other aspect of that game, other than, the error in the 5th inning and the walk that we gave up to put the winning run on base, we outplayed Mexico. So to me, other than the score, which I understand is the final outcome, we did far more right than wrong, and I'm confident that in a year's time we'll be ready to do what we need to get done.
Great. Okay, so this is from Laurence. For newer coaches starting at a higher level, what are some of the best resources you can recommend for those coaches?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to learn about. There are a number of good books that are available. One of them that I highly recommend is Heads Up Baseball by Ken Revisa, the late Ken Revisa, who was a mental performance guru. It talks about all aspects of athlete and coach preparation. There's chapters with questions at the end of each chapter that really give you an opportunity to use with a team. In fact, we've used it with our team, where we use the questions at the end of the chapter as a bit of a discussion board for us to talk about how those questions resonate with players. I think that's a really good book to read. There's a book called Legacy that's written by James Kerr. He spent a year with the New Zealand All Blacks and sort of understanding the culture of arguably the winningest sport franchise in the world. I think that gives you some great insights around shaping your culture within a team and how you build your leaders and how you define success and how the team plays a role in that. I've had a number of reads over the year. Phil Jackson's book, The Winner Within, is a great book. Wade Gilbert's got a book out called Better Coaching every season, which is a really good resource book and guide. So I think it depends on what the information is that you're looking for. Are you a head coach or an assistant coach? What's the role you play? And I think you base what you want to learn about based on the position you're in.
Great. Okay, so Peter wants to first off thank you for all you've done for softball in our country, and says that he has about 1,000 questions for you. But the one he posted in here was, how can we further expose the game, in your opinion, to young kids in this country?
Boy, Peter, if we had the answer to that, you and I wouldn't be working for a living. It's tough. I mean, there's so many things for kids to do today, and we're just but one option on a menu of hundreds of things for kids to do. And then when you introduce the X Games and those sports that are more individual based, where a kid who doesn't fit into mainstream sport can go off and do his or her own thing and get lots of satisfaction and recognition from that, it's difficult. Our sport is a pretty complex sport. There's a lot of things you have to know how to do and think about doing, even at a younger age. So my experience is about just trying to keep it simple and make it fun. And it takes me back many years to when my daughter was 7 or 8 years of age and decided she wanted to play ball. And we lived in a community where there was boys softball, but not girls softball. And I endeavored to create an opportunity for young females. And the number one prerequisite for me was they had to have fun. They had to want to come back and do it 2 or 3 days later. So I modified the games and the activities. I incorporated things like beach balls and things that for kids who are less coordinated, that they could not hurt themselves no matter what they tried. I got mom and dad off the fence and out on the field to help me with things that would not embarrass them, but allow them to interact with their child and other children. And we had a heck of a lot of fun for 2 years, and the kids loved it. They decided some of them wanted to play soccer and do other things, which was fine. And I wasn't in a position to run a program or coach them. But I think it's about making sure that kids fall in love with our sport. And the way we do that is by making sure they have a really positive experience when they come. How do we modify it based on the age and stage of development, the age group of kids you work with? That becomes the coach's challenge. But I used to give them a popsicle or a freezy. That was the deal. After every session, you got a popsicle or a freezy. I'm sure for some, that's why they came. But I hope that I entertained them enough that they had a good enough experience that they wanted to come back again next week.
Right. Great. Thank you. Okay. So Mackenzie is wondering, in a regular season, obviously athletes would potentially be scouted or seen for the national team. And in this current situation, that likely may not happen. So how can athletes who want to be seen put themselves out there? Any suggestions? Well,
it's timely. We know that there would have been a junior world championship in August of this year in Lima, Peru, which has been canceled. And we as a staff have been talking about how do we get the word out and get a look at the young people who will be of age to try out for that team. So Mackenzie, there's news coming. We haven't got it all sorted out yet, but our hope is that towards the end of the summer, when some of the restrictions are lifted and we can travel from province to province and we can get out on the field and do things, that we will put some mechanisms in place to be able to identify people for the junior program that will now, of course, the games will be sometime likely in 2021. But we are very sensitive to that. We know that there are a pocket of young women across the country who would be extremely anxious about this opportunity. And we've talked about it as a coaching staff. The junior team is under the umbrella of the senior team. So I'm in regular contact with the people who will coach our junior program, and we are looking to rectify and create as fair and transparent a process as possible to ensure we get a chance to see people perform this summer.
Awesome. Okay, so from Rebecca, she would like to know if you think there's been a shift in athletes choosing to remain in Canada to pursue secondary school education, given the current situation right now.
Well, I don't know that for sure. I mean, there's no question that the education you get at a Canadian university, unless it's a specialized degree, is a much better quality of education than you get in the United States. I think most young people that go to the United States go with the ambition of wanting to play softball, understandably. A percentage of them have the talent or the potential to play internationally. And depending on where they play, what division they play, what conference they play in, all of those things contribute to, how much that opportunity increases. But we have two schools in Canada. We have, the University of British Columbia, and we have Simon Fraser that also offers softball programs. And I know to a lesser degree, there's a university level program offered in Ontario in the fall. And I know that in Alberta that there's a program offered as well. So there are some opportunities for Canadian athletes to continue to pursue softball and also pursue a high quality of academics. I think it really just depends on, how serious you are about wanting to take your game to the next level. And there's no question that if playing internationally is your goal, the NCAA is probably the proving ground for where most, if not all, of our players, certainly during my tenure, have come from.
Great. So Margaret is wanting to know a little bit about how you assess an athlete's intangibles, especially at a tryout, or how can an athlete display those skills at a tryout when predominantly coaches are looking at, physical or skill-based results?
Well, I think the cold truth to all of it is that to play at an international level, you have to have talent. And so it is important to know how fast people run, how hard people throw, how far people hit the ball. Those things are those are difference makers. So if an athlete has good skill and that skill is good enough to get them to a camp and they are able to compete positionally for the position they play, then the intangibles really do become important. Are they coachable? Do they listen? Are they multi-positional? Can they take direction? Are they willing to try new things, despite the fact that there's usually failure before there's success? Those are the intangible qualities you look for. But the truth of the matter is, until you demonstrate, a basic standard of skill that allows you to be in that conversation, you can be the nicest person in the world. But if your skills aren't good enough to play at that level, unfortunately, the intangibles aren't going to matter.
Great. James says that he's coaching a U16 girls rep team, and he wanted to know how you recommend balancing fun as well as discipline in the process of practicing games.
I think one of the things I would do is give the athletes a little bit of say. I don't know how often they train. I know there have been some programs that I've been in contact with over the years in the country that train an awful lot, and I think they risk burnout with their athletes because there is no break. They finish in the summer, and then in September they're tryouts for next year's team, and then October they're back in the gym and they're training a couple of times a week, and maybe they're trying to play other sports or balance part-time jobs. And at some point they come up against things where choices have to be made. So I think part of it is being realistic about all that goes on in a young person's life today. And then what are the things that you want to get from it? What are the things that they want to get from it? How competitive is our program? What are our goals? And this is important because I think there's a lot of coaches that make the decision to get involved in coaching competitive sport because they have very specific goals that they want to achieve. But those goals may not align with why your athletes are showing up every day. And if
Right.
they don't, boy, it's a miserable experience for all involved. So if you're ultra competitive, but you're coaching athletes that want to show up twice a week, have fun, play a little softball, go on about their business and get on with life, then you're probably in the wrong place.
Right.
But I think the place you start is, what do they want to accomplish? And in my experience, when you give them a little bit of say and an opportunity to have input into the things you're doing, they tend to be a lot more receptive to sometimes the harder things that they're going to have to do to be part of it, because they feel as though they're able to influence pieces of what they're responsible to do.
Right. I like that. Okay, so Ryan would like to know, how do you work at delegating coach tasks to your assistant coaches? What's that relationship like?
Well, one of the advantages that I have that Ryan may not is that I can hire on the basis of skill set. And when I hire for the national team, I'm hiring people that bring a particular skill set. So I'm looking for a pitching expertise or hitting expertise, or I'm looking for fielding expertise. So when I hire them based on the knowledge they bring, they automatically are going to be given responsibilities associated with the areas they're very good at. I think in a more generic sense, it's about visiting with your coaches and talking about what are the things they have interest in. You know, what are the things that, first of all, as a head coach, have you sat down and really thought or broken out the things that you want to be able to assign for people to do versus what you want to do yourself? And then finding out what people have interest in. And then I think the most important thing, and this is with whether it's volunteer coaching or it's in a workplace, you have to align people with things they're good at. You know, it doesn't make sense to give a person a statistics job if they can't count beyond fingers and toes. Like, you're looking for trouble. So I think it's important to understand that when you're asking people to come out and help with your team, no different than if you're selecting a board. You know, what skill sets are they going to bring that makes us better? Where can they add value to what it is we're trying to do? And I think if you have those conversations on the front end, it's a lot easier to sort of delegate or assign things to specific people based on the skill sets they bring.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to end off with one more question. There are a lot more questions, and unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all of them, but that might mean that we'll just have to do this again sometime, Mark. So,
Right.
so the last question is basically, you know, how are you, and what advice can you give to other coaches? What are some suggestions on keeping athletes motivated right now? How are you doing that on your end, and what advice do you have for coaches being able to keep their athletes motivated as well during this time right now?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is let them know you're thinking about them and you care about them, and finding out a little bit about how they're feeling, because even with our Olympic level athletes, this has been a real punch in the gut. And, you know, all of a sudden, all of that training that you've done for months is seemingly gone for naught. And now you don't know when you're going to get on the field again. And all the gains you feel you've made, both technically and tactically and physiologically, you feel like you're losing. So there's a complete mindset piece that kind of goes with it. So I think getting on the telephone with them, using, you know, these platforms, whether it's Zoom or Skype or go to webinar, and seeing kids face to face, where they can see you, you can see them. You know, there's a difference in terms of the connection piece is important. I think also, what are some of the things that they're at an age and stage to do? I talked a little bit about the reading. Are there books? Do you have books where you can photocopy chapters and then post them so that they don't have to go out and buy a book, but they can follow through? Do they have opportunities in their home to work on elements of their softball without breaking windows and doors and things like that at home? I think those are the kinds of things you have conversations with them and their parents about, so that you can keep them engaged, because, you know, the truth is the weather's only going to get better, which means we're only going to miss it more. So what are the things within the confines of their home and their backyards that they can do that allows them to stay as connected as possible until we can get out on the field and play together?
Right. Well, Mark, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being our first guest, and we really appreciate it and loved your insight today. And thanks to all that listened. We will be having many more of these. Our next one coming up on Friday, which is player experience. So we encourage you to register for that one. Yeah, we're just so thankful, and we look forward to getting back on the field so soon. So much, Mark, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
So as Angela mentioned, that wraps up our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us and sending your great questions. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to email either Angela or myself at Softball Canada. The next webinar will take place this Friday, April 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, as we have a player experience chat with 4 national team athletes who will speak about their path from minor softball to international competition and the experience they've gained along the way. Joining us will be Jenna Kyra from the Canadian Women's National Team, Xavier Dano from our Junior Men's National Team program, Megan Duclos from our Junior Women's National Team, and Steve Mullally from the Men's National Team. We hope to have you there. Cela conclut notre période de questions. Merci beaucoup d'avoir participé, de nous avoir envoyé vos excellentes questions. Si vous avez des commentaires ou des suggestions, veuillez les envoyer à Gilles Leblanc, Angela Valentine à Softball Canada. Le prochain webinaire aura lieu ce vendredi, le 24 avril à 2h de l'après-midi, heure de l'Est. Alors qu'on parlera de l'expérience de l'athlète avec 4 athlètes de l'équipe nationale qui parleront de leur parcours du softball mineur à la compétition internationale. Avec nous seront Jenna Kyra de l'équipe nationale féminine, Xavier Dano de l'équipe nationale junior masculine, Megan Duclos de l'équipe nationale junior féminine et Steve Mullally de l'équipe nationale masculine. On espère que vous y serez.